Here in the WCNC Plus Live Impact News Studio, I am WCNC Charlotte Sports Director Nick Carboni. Every Monday night here at 9 o'clock, good or bad, we recap the Carolina Panthers game from the day before and look ahead to what's next. Carolina in Arizona. Horrific start. 2 turnovers on 2 straight drives. They are down 27-3 in the second half. They string together 19 straight points, all for it all to fall apart at the end as Bryce Young goes 0 for 6 on what would be the final drive for the Panthers and lose 27-22. A lot to unpack. So here to help us do just that is John Ellis. You can find him on X at One Panther Place. He's also a host on Fox Sports Upstate, and you can hear him on the Panthers pregame show on Sundays on 99.7 The Fox. Johnny, got to start with this, buddy. What is it going to take for this professional football team to start professional football games well?
I wish I knew. This is not our first rodeo, Nick. We've seen, as John Fox once said, the deepest and the highest now. And I've had the fortune of covering this team along with you since 2019. You've got to go back to the operational stuff that we talked about. This is a tale of 2 different games, and every game has its own personality. I think week 1, it was a story of just the play clock. Dave Canales had talked about, somebody had mentioned during the broadcast there on CBS that they had worked on play clock fundamentals throughout the week, and you could tell that part of it was better. But, Nick, you can't take the opening kickoff, which pretty much means you're giving the ball back in the second half. You can't take the opening kickoff, within the first 2.5 minutes, fumble the ball. That fumble goes into the hands of a defender, and they score a touchdown. That's a recipe for disaster, and I know we'll get to how they finish, and there's some positive things to build on. But you can't start that way in the NFL and expect to win. You just can't. The game was lost in the first 2 minutes.
We all know Dave Canales for his sunny disposition, even after losses. I wouldn't say sunny after losses, but finding more positives. He was noticeably frustrated, visibly, I thought, in his post-game press conference last night. And Vashti Hurd asked him kind of about that frustration, and here's what Dave Canales told us.
Yeah, I think it's just the frustration of what I feel like we have. The group that we've assembled here, and to see glimpses of it, and to not see the consistency. And I know that we'll get there with hard work. But they got to be studs about it. We all have to be studs about it as a staff and as players as well. That we are going to have to be disciplined about our approach. We had a great week of practice. The focus was there. The intensity's there. We cannot back off of that. That's our standard. That's the standard of work, and we have to be studs about how we go back to work.
All right, Canales coming up just short of the Matt Rule. We can see it in practice. You just can't see it on Sunday, to paraphrase. But he did own it from a coaching perspective a little bit there. How much of this is coaching when you have, the guys you've brought in over 2 off seasons? Nobody expects you to go out there and go 17-0, but they certainly expect you to play better football throughout games than they have in 2 weeks.
Yeah, you got to wear it. You got to own it. If you're the coach, I mean, we've been hard on a lot of these coaches that have come through here, and the wins have not been there for this fan base that's been waiting since 2017 for that type of playoff feeling. So, yeah, I'm sure Dave knows that. It's part of the business. I thought that was a very fair question and response by Vashti and by the coach. And, I think Dave, he's got a lot on his plate right now. When you're the offensive coordinator, essentially you're the play caller. Brad Idzik is the OC, and I respect the work he does immensely. It's a lot on his plate right now. And we've seen coaches in the past, sort of delegate that stuff. Our good friend Mike Kay wrote a great piece in The Observer this morning alluding to the fact that, maybe there is a time where, Dave needs to look at delegating that authority and getting his hands around the entire operation. I don't know yet if that should be the case. But I think, it is, coaching in a lot of ways. Of course it is, because, part of what plagues them are the fundamental things about the football game in any level, whether it's college, high school, or the pros. It's turnovers. It's unfortunate penalties at the worst possible times. It's situational football late in the half where you burn timeouts and you still give Arizona a very good opportunity to get a touchdown, and they capitalize on what appeared to be some type of coverage miscalculation there. And again, we get back to week 1. It took them a while to get off the runway, so to speak, in terms of the operational stuff with the clock. And those are things that come back to coaching. So I think it's very fair to call him out on that if you want to. I think he's got to go back to the drawing board and make this manageable for the quarterback and the entire team to operate functionally within the confines of the structure of the offense and the defense. I know there's scheme questions out there. I'm not so concerned about the scheme. Just get the simple things down right and then grow from there.
All right, here talking to John Ellis from Fox Sports Upstate and 99.7, the Fox Panthers pregame show about the Carolina Panthers' 27-22 loss in Arizona and their 0-2 start. John, trying to evaluate Bryce Young in this game will make you dizzy, right? I mean, the two horrific turnovers to start the game, then he strings together 19 straight points, but then, 0-6 on that all-important final drive. How do you evaluate him in this game, and especially where it fits into the context of this wait-and-see mode the Panthers are in with him to see if he deserves an extension or the fifth-year option?
Yeah, it's getting late in the game here. I mean, look, we're in year 3 now. So this is where Bill Parcells famously once said it's time to take the diapers off for his young quarterbacks. It's time to move on and graduate into that next level to where we're not having to manage him so much. And I think with Bryce, it showed a lot of poise and courage on his part. And I don't use that word lightly, courage, but it did show a lot of courage. And Adam Archuleta brought this up numerous times on the broadcast, and the tape I've looked at so far bears this out. Some of the throws he had to make late in that game, there's a lot of talk about, well, it was prevent defense. And some of those coverages were soft, and some of the DBs were out late in the game. I was highly encouraged by how he stuck in there. I mean, they're down 27-3 in this game. They string together methodical drives, and I thought some of the throws he made, especially the one to Renfro for that second touchdown, he's connecting a real bond with Ted McMillan, who looks to be as real of a deal as Carolina's had at receiver in a long, long time. I still believe in Bryce as a quarterback, and I say that with no fan hat on. I say that as a guy who looks at tape and would tell you right now, as somebody who's covered Sam Darnold in the past and has seen some deficiencies at times in his game, and good for Sam for moving on. Mayfield was here for a minute, P.J. Walker, all these quarterbacks they've had. I still think there's too much promise with the former Heisman winner to give up on him right now. But these next few months are critical. He needs to have performances like this starting in the first quarter, into the second quarter, into the second half of games. There cannot be a lapse like there was yesterday in the first 2 minutes. No matter where the pressure comes from, you can't fumble the ball, put it on the ground, and the other team score. Those are things that have to get cleaned up. And it's 2 weeks in a row now where there have been avoidable turnovers that have led to big-time scoring opportunities for the opponents. And that's probably the primary reason, among others, they're right now at 0-2 instead of 1-1 or 2-0.
John, the Panthers put themselves in great position with the comeback and then recovering the onside kick, but it seemed like their best plays on that final drive were penalties by the defense. Bryce Young went 0 for 6. I also thought that Dave Canales, as the play caller, and maybe there's more nuance to this that you can dive into, tried to get it all at once the whole time. And he said he watched the drive back 3 times here on Monday. What is he probably realizing when he watches it?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. I think also, too, you've got to get back to the players as well. Canales needs to be ready to operate with his best plays and his Rolodex in that moment. And I would argue maybe they could have trimmed away a little bit. And I know they had a carry in that drive with Hubbard. They gave him the ball on a rushing attempt to try to get a little drive starter going. They also had a nice pass to Hubbard over the middle where he caught some blocks and got out of bounds, but unfortunately a holding call brought that one back. So I thought that was, as much as anything, a critical error by the offense to be penalized on a play that could have put them right there inside the 30. You're in the high red zone at that point, and you can really start attacking. But, yeah, I think McMillan, was targeted one time on that final drive. Maybe it's okay if you want to get it in one chunk to try to find a way to isolate him somewhere against that broken-down secondary at that point. I'm not a coach. I don't claim to be. It's frustrating. I think you got to execute, though, and they give you not only the defensive holding, but the roughing the passer, which was a very dubious call. You got to capitalize on those. It was great to get the onside kick back. That was highly executed. There's a little bit of luck, too. It's the first time since 2019 this team has recovered an onside kick. They're harder than ever to get. But to be back in that position, it took a lot of people to get the team back in a winning position towards the end of the game, including the coach. Give him some credit for that. But, yeah, that was not their best drive, not at all. And that comes back to not only Bryce, not only the receivers, one or two in particular I can think of, but it comes back to the coaching too.
I can think of one too, John, and we are going to talk about what in the world is going on with Xavier Legette coming right up here on WCNC Plus. Stick around. Here on WCNC Plus with John Ellis of at One Panther Place on X, Fox Sports Upstate, Panthers pregame show 99.7. The Fox. He's also a husband and father. I've left out many jobs, John, but part of your job with me today is try to make sense of this wide receiver room as Bryce Young really, like in real time, tries to figure out who he can trust. And right now he cannot trust last year's first-round pick, Xavier Legette. He loves horses, right? We all know that about XL. He put together a unicorn stat line of 8 targets for -2 yards. Never seen anything like that in my life. What is going on with this guy right now? And we'll hear from Dave Canales in a minute, but I want your thoughts on the first 2 games this season from a guy that everybody thought could and would take the next step.
Early. I mean, we're 2 weeks into this season. I think there are going to be ample opportunities for every receiver on this group right now, including Jalen Coker, who they expect back at some point, to thrive opposite McMillan. I think it's really imperative to be very nuanced about this, because I've heard a lot of echo chamber just bashing Legette, and I don't think it's fair to do that, but I think it's fair to be, critical of some play that hasn't been great. And I think some of the routes are a little bit sluggish at times. I think one of the complaints we've heard from people that scout this league out quite a bit, and I'm one of them, is the fact that, when you get in a position to catch balls either on the boundary or maybe in the middle of the field, use that huge frame of yours to be more of a power forward and post up and sort of rebound those balls. He's, anywhere between 6'1" and 6'3", depending on who you trust in terms of how tall he is, but he's so physically gifted. They've got to find a way to make the best out of that. I'd say the other thing, too, the one thing that Dave Canales had talked about in the preseason was using him more as a movement player and getting the ball in his hands while he's on the move. And they've tried that in some ways that I don't think are necessarily conducive to who he is. He's not Deebo Samuel. I don't need to see him in the backfield necessarily running jet sweeps. I like the idea, but I think you just got to get him on some crossers, get him moving a little bit, and see if you can get him across horizontally and get him with the ball in his hands while he's on the move. But, yeah, he's got to get better. He's got to get more refined. I don't think it's necessarily a matter of his routes being bad. He's just got to finish the plays.
All right, Dave Canales was asked about him multiple times on Monday at his weekly news conference, but it sounds like he's still going with XL. He's not taking any reps away. Here we go.
This is a guy that I truly believe, because of the way he's wired, the way that he works at it, the way that he continues to train. He had a great week of practice. He played better. He had some opportunities on the field where the ball didn't go his way. I tried to get him a few early touches. They didn't amount to much, but as the game kind of went on, a few of the other targets, they were close plays. He didn't make them, but I think it's a matter of just finding opportunities. I believe in him. I believe that he's approached this the right way and just continues to work. So I'm going to continue to encourage him and be in his corner and push him to keep striving for that and keep working on his chemistry with Bryce, because he's got the talent, and I think at times he can be hard on himself, and he can be really critical of himself, and I want him to make sure that he knows he's supported, that we got to play ball, let's go, and there's that balance of pushing him, and there's that balance of also saying, you got this, remember who you are.
Xavier Legette entered yesterday's game with 10 receiving yards. He flew back to Charlotte with 8. That's hard to do. John, I know a lot of people want to be football film critics from the couch, right, and talk about effort. To me, it kind of goes into what Canales said, and we've talked to Legette about this. He gets down on himself, and I think that affects him throughout the course of a game. What do you see on film from 17?
Yeah, that effort is never something I'm going to judge when I look at tape. It's got to be glaring. And you have to know there's a track record with a guy of bad performance in the effort department to really stake that claim. It's just a bad look, and I'll never do it. But you heard some of what the coach said there in that clip, and I think it's revealing. And you and I have talked about Legette, and he will get down on himself at times. I don't want to necessarily correlate that having an impact on effort on the field. There's one play that comes to mind, and I don't want to pin it on him. It's the Jatavion Sanders catch that was not a catch, and Legette was the last person to line up in that formation before the snap. And in theory, you would think that gave the officials extra time to review that and overturn it, and that was an instrumental play. But fans get upset about that. I look at that with a critical eye. I think Canales is a good man for standing up there and an even better coach for standing up there and standing up for his guy, because it's a guy they drafted in his first draft class. You kind of need to say those things. You can't get up there and take a approach with a guy. And I think it's important to remember that Dave, for all that the heat he's taking right now, and he deserves some of it, he has worked with some of the best receivers in this league, with Mike Evans. He's worked directly with Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and others, and he's gotten the best out of these guys who all have different personality quirks. And so I think that's one of his edges and his advantages in this department. I'll tell you this, much like we saw with Bryce Young last year, if the production doesn't pick up, you can say all the nice things publicly about a guy, he will be replaced in terms of reps. And Coker's waiting right there on IR to come back. Bryson Tremaine looks very promising right now, the undrafted rookie from Stanford. And I think, you got to continue to look and see what you have with Renfro in the slot there. Jatavion Sanders is getting a lot of targets right now. It's a performance business, so time to start producing. I don't think his attitude is necessarily impacting the performance. I think it's the other way around.
It's time to start producing. Tetiaroa McMillan has understood the assignment from day one as a rookie. John, it is early, like we say with all these things on the negative side, on the positive side too. But as somebody who doesn't dive into film like you do, this dude passes the eye test. He gets it. He seems to have it, and it being what you want for a number one or X wide receiver. What have you liked about T-Mac so far?
Just about everything. I mean, honestly, he is so smooth with his routes, and we saw this at Arizona, and this is one of the big things we've talked about in the offseason. I'll give my podcast partner, Billy Marshall, a lot of credit on this. He was an advocate for McMillan more than most that I know all the way through the draft process, and there was a lot of talk throughout combine season where the 40 time didn't match up to maybe what the expectation for fans are. He is football fast, and he's quick in short space, and he's a guy that I mentioned this last night on Twitter, and I mean this with all due respect to these other individuals, one of whom should be in the Hall of Fame by now. The other is having a tremendous career, DJ Moore being the first, and then Steve Smith being the other. Nick, you've covered this team for a long time. It's been a while since just at first glance, the eyeball test you talk about, you can see a receiver get out of a short route, a hitch route, anything like that, turn and have that type of body control. He impacts everything on every level of the defense. And it's a long time coming since the Panthers have had a passing weapon like that for their quarterback. Got to keep maximizing that. And I think protection, I'm sure we'll get to this in a minute, but that's going to be a challenge now with some of the injuries. But yeah, on his own, yeah, gosh almighty, he is so smooth and fluid. And it's a 100-yard day for him yesterday in a challenging environment. They had some good corners and safeties out there until they got hurt late. And a lot of that production was in the midst of Carolina trying to dig back into that game. So I think it's a tremendous draft pick so far.
All right, I need Radio John here. I got 90 seconds to the end of this break. You talked about the O-line. Rob Hunt, Austin Corbett going to be out for a while. Concerns there. What do you like about Zavala and Mays filling in those spots?
Yeah, I love Cade Mays. You follow me a lot on Twitter. I've been a Mays fan, and I think Bryce, it's been documented, played some of his best football with Cade Mays in that position. I'm a big fan of Austin Corbett, too. I've chronicled his film over the years. It's a tough loss for Carolina. No matter how many fans out there want to pin it all on Corbett, it's not all on him. But I think Mays is a great replacement plan. I'm interested in what Brady Christensen's role is right now. Zavala is a very promising prospect, but Christensen was a
they brought him back
to what they did, Nick. They brought him back, and he came back, and it was seen as a real sort of coup by the front office to get that done. I would think not only the left tackle absence last week, but now one of the guard positions, you'd want to plug him in there and see, a guy that's been loyal here but has also been very productive here. That'd be the guy I'd like to see to, be the replacement plan for Robert Hunt, who, by the way, is going to be missed. Hunt is arguably the best guy on the interior offensive line for this team. But I think Zavala's a solid player. It's just a matter of continuity now. Can they keep this group together moving forward? If it becomes a revolving door with every position, we've seen that before, Nick, back to 2021. You don't want to see that again.
All right, Panthers are coming home. What are Panthers fans walking into in that one? We're going to talk about this game against the Falcons with John Ellis coming up. Back for a few minutes with our good friend John Ellis from Fox Sports Upstate and the Panthers pregame show on 99.7 The Fox. John, where can we find you and hear you this weekend as the Panthers play their first home game?
Yeah, man, thanks for that. 99.7 The Fox. My friend E. White and I are going to be hosting the tailgate show there live from Clutch. Come on out and see us at 9 a.m. We'll be tailgating with you guys, and we'll be getting you set for Jim Zoki and Anish Shroff and the crew calling this game. And you can hear us every single day on the iHeartRadio app on 104.9 Fox Sports Upstate in afternoon time, 5 to 7 p.m. I appreciate the plug, man.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll come down there and see it before the game. Let's talk about the defense. Didn't get to that. Lost in all of this kind of roller coaster of a day from really the offense. The defense really buckled down. And gosh darn it, John, they didn't allow 200 rushing yards. They didn't even allow 100. It was our lowest rushing total allowed since week 3 of last season against Vegas. It was 82 yards, 3.7 a pop. What did you think of this defense, and can it carry over?
Much improved. I thought it was real promising. Coach Canales had talked about wanting to get some of the younger guys on the field. I think that's a breath of fresh air. There was a play where Skirton had a nice blitz inside. It's interesting to see his deployment. Now, he overran that blitz a little bit, and Kyler Broke contained Princely, Mielian, who had just had a tremendous career in college with his first career sack. Lathan Ransom making some big plays. I also thought Pat Jones had a really good day. He was sort of the catalyst that got that comeback going, and DJ Wonna making the great interception. But Pat Jones came from opposite side of the field to pressure and then contain Murray, which is not easy to do. So those are good things. And I think Derek Brown being back in the lineup, you can't always see it on the stat sheet. You look at the film, he was much better this week in terms of anchoring, setting the edge, helping in sort of that 5 technique role. Bobby Brown's been solid with the absence of Turk Wharton, who they definitely could use him back. We'll continue to look at the secondary, but I thought Mike Jackson and J.C. Horn played well. I thought Ransom was very good when he was in there. So the young guys, I would just continue to play those guys. The one thing you still worry about a little bit is that linebacking core. I like Trevin Wallace. I like Rosemoon. They just got to gel together a little bit. It's been a long time since the Panthers have had deficiencies in the interior at linebacker. No matter how bad this team is, they usually have very good players there. So these guys have a high bar to reach.
All right, so statistically, when you look at the box sheet, 82 yards rushing, they get an interception off of Kyler Murray. They're only responsible for 20 of the Cardinals' points, but they give up the backbreaker at the end of the first half after the catch-non-catch. There's got to be some blame there, John, because that was a massive play that they did not execute.
Yep. Again, it looked to me like it was sort of a cover zero look, but it was disguised, and Roseboom, the linebacker, dropped out late. And it looked to me like the safety, Nick Scott, had some degree of responsibility on the side of the field where they found Wilson for that touchdown, but I think Shel Smith-Wade was in coverage there. Again, I'm reluctant to pull one guy out, and Nick Scott has been taking a lot of lumps on social. I'm not piling on him. He's a pro. The coach loves him. The staff loves him. But those are plays that when the team dives into the film this week, they'll certainly be calling them out. Fans don't need to be worried about that. And if stuff like that continues, there will be replacements in key positions where there are lapses, but you can't have that happen. You can blame one guy. Again, this comes back to coaching. You've got to be better as an entire unit. Whether it's Evero, whether it's Dave Canales, late situational football to give that up, and then they open up with a touchdown in the third quarter. That's backbreaking right there. You're right. They pull back into the game, but again, those things can really just ruin your entire Sunday.
Coach John Ellis says it's the biggest game because it's the next game. What does radio host John Ellis say about why this home game against Atlanta after an 0-2 start is massive for Dave Canales and Bryce Young specifically?
Depends on what your expectations are, fans. If you're expecting this team to be what John Fox's team was in year 2, and that's take a team from 7 wins to playoff contention in the Super Bowl, yeah, this is big. If you're willing to take more of a 3-year window approach, it's still big, but it's not as big. But if you're thinking playoffs, if you're thinking in this division, you want to be relevant, and that's what every team is thinking right now in the league. Fans may have different expectations. It's monumental. Atlanta's a better team this year. We can talk about their secondary. We can talk about their pass rush. It's much better. We saw that last night against J.J. McCarthy and company. But I think really what it comes down to, getting back to the fundamental roots of who you are. This is a run team. Bryce Young cannot have 55 pass attempts every week. In fact, no weeks. How about that? That can't happen. The whole foundation of this team was built upon offensive line, depth at offensive line. I don't care who's out there blocking. Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle and company need to be carrying the ball 25 to 30 times collectively a game.
All right, John, about 90 seconds as Zoom tries to kick you out of here. What's the biggest thing that concerns you about Michael Penix and the Atlanta Falcons, who, wasn't pretty, but they got a win on Sunday Night Football against Minnesota?
Yeah, it wasn't pretty, but Bijan Robinson is always a threat, especially when you're a team that's trying to slowly piece your run defense back together. He can ruin that in one run. I mean, he's a guy that can house anything from the field. So he's a guy you got to read your keys, you got to set the edge, you got to be able to read and react properly at the second level, and you need your third level guys to be able to set the tone on that end. And I think Penix, he's come into his own. He made some nice throws last night, even better in week 1. It's the defense, Nick. They got so much better in terms of pressure. They drafted Jalen Walker. They drafted James Pierce Jr. They've got good interior defensive linemen. A lot of names we don't know about that are suddenly getting pressure because everybody's making each other better. This is not the Atlanta Falcons we've seen dating back to 4 or 5 years, maybe longer, and it's especially not the Falcons defense we saw week 17 or 18 last year when Bryce and company ran wild. It's a much different challenge, so I would expect a low-scoring slugfest. Panthers need to match their physicality. It's a very good team.
All right, you can hear him before Sunday's game on 99.7 The Fox, or you can go see him at Clutch Bar. John Ellis, I look forward to seeing you in the press box Sunday afternoon, buddy. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Nick.